under what's known as the Cotonou Agreement, there is a funding cooperative agreement which lasted for 20 years, from 2000 to 2020, and when it expires in 2020, it's going to be important for us to know what the new arrangements will be. Now is the time to look at midterm and other schedules. Now is the time to look at what alternative arrangements might be in place. Now is the time to service that cooperation, that partnership between the European Union and the ACP in a way that doesn't catch us napping, in a way that doesn't take us by surprise. One of the things that I think it's important to note also, though, talking about the variety of the membership of the Caribbean Tourism Organization, is that the delegation itself served quite an interesting purpose. We had the honor of having along with us a CARICOM country. We had the Minister of Tourism for Trinidad and Tobago, the Honorable Shamfa Cudjoe, who was with us. We had Martinique with us as well, a part of France. So the Deputy Commissioner of Tourism for the island of Martinique, Marilyn Lesdema, was a part of the delegation. Now, we also had the British Virgin Islands along as a part of the delegation as well. So we had an interesting mix representative of the body of membership of the Caribbean Tourism Organization, and of course the CTO Secretariat's responsibility is to represent those who were there as well as those who were not. So the whole of the CTO was represented. Also part of the delegation was the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association. Its president, Caroline Trevets-Coy, was with us on that mission to Brussels. And so we were able to say to our partners in the European Commission that we represented the public sector, the private sector, and a public-private partnership, which is critically important because a lot of the elements of development funding have to do with issues that envelop the public-private partnership. So it was important that we checked all of the aspects that needed to be discussed and were prepared to discuss those. The meetings weren't only with the European Commission. We had really fruitful and productive meetings with the African Caribbean Pacific Group's Secretariat. The Secretary General, Dr. P.I. Gomes, Patrick Gomes, is himself a Caribbean man. He's the Secretary General of the ACP, and that meeting was extremely useful to us in terms of guidance as to what the particular landmarks are that are being discussed in Brussels in European corridors now, and what markers we need to keep our eye on. We had an interesting meeting with the CARIFORUM ambassadors in Brussels, and that meeting was led by the current dean of that diplomatic group, and that is Ambassador David Hales of Guyana, and it was a full house. And so those meetings with the ambassadors, our representatives really in Brussels, in the European Union, those meetings were extremely useful. Clearly, we were able to do two things. One, understand from our Caribbean ambassadors the lay of the land from their point of view. They are there, and they are the eyes and ears of our region. But most importantly, we needed to help them to understand what we're doing in terms of tourism. And it's not always immediately obvious that we are doing as good a job as we could to get that information circulated to all of the corridors where it should be. So a lot of that purpose was met as well. So overall, I think the mission to Brussels was an extremely fruitful one. Clearly, there is a huge amount of follow-up which must now be done, and I believe that our teams at the Caribbean Tourism Organization and, frankly, at the CHDA and our other partners are up to the task of doing the follow-up effectively.
You found out, and you mentioned the European Development Fund, and which CTO itself does no longer directly benefits from. Used to be, at one point, CTO managed quite a bit of funding from the EDF, but there still is funding available for Caribbean tourism through special projects around there.
Yes, absolutely. And this is about a partnership. There are pockets of funding. First of all, the overall objectives of the fund are in line with many of the objectives of the Caribbean Tourism Organization. So when we talk about the need to pay attention to climate change, renewable energy sources, security issues, disaster preparedness, disaster mitigation, human capital development. These are parts of the cooperative agreements that the European Union has with its partners, and they are right in line with a number of the programs that the CTO has for Caribbean tourism. So the obvious answer is, if there is need on the one hand and pockets of funding on the other, it is our responsibility at the CTO to find a way to bring the two together on behalf of our member countries.